Good evening, Zoom FaceTiles. I am Kirsty Styles, and this is 10 Minutes to Save the Planet. At this point, I would usually say, yes, that is Styles, as in Harry, and make some topical reference to how much we've been missing each other during lockdown. But I accidentally heard some of young Styles' latest music recently, and handsome as he is, I just don't think it's worth me associating myself with him anymore. So, my name is Kirsty Styles. Yes, that is Styles, as in Kirsty. This all feels much less grandiose sitting in your kitchen in your PJs. And no, Dad, actually, this is not a lockdown fringe. As Kath said, I used to work as a journalist in the international tax haven and people hole that is London. Hello, London. But I left my last full-time journo gig as a technology editor at the New Statesman in 2016 because I just couldn't quite believe that the liberal media elite hadn't seen Brexit coming. Or rather I could, and that felt like a problem. I'm now doing a PhD, as Kath said, looking at the environmental impact of this thing that we call the media, because so's everyone, even that hilarious meme that you just shared has an environmental impact. Now, I've only got about 9.5 minutes to talk about saving the planet, which is equivalent to 28.5 happy birthdays, to use the official COVID-19 counting system. So, in the past, I've done comedy about technology, I've done comedy about jobs, I've even trained other journalists to do comedy about journalism and then done comedy about that. And I'm sure you'll agree that that sounds really fun. But I've been going over and over this whole environmental destruction thing. And well, it's really not that funny. I've been out in the woods, as we call it in academia, to make us sound rugged, but reading books is probably a more accurate description. And it turns out that climate change is actually just one of 9 planetary boundaries, as we call them in the business, which, if we breach them, well, we're not fucked, but we're a bit fucked. I know, we're all just trying to get our heads around how we can lower our own carbon emissions. Hot tips, everyone. Do eat more vegetables, do get a bike, do try not to fly, and don't buy stuff that you don't need. And if you want a quick reference for what those kinds of things are, just think about those necessities that you elbowed grannies out of the way for during lockdown. Oh, and if you're driving an SUV to the shops, well, I guess the people of the future, who I think you call your children, will have a special name for people like you. I know people of the internet, doing our bit, recycling when we can be bothered, buying bamboo toothbrushes, but it turns out there's even more to it than our top favourite planetary boundary, climate change. So, number 2 is biosphere integrity. Let's call it how quickly we're making things extinct and the problems that that obviously causes. Number 3 is ocean acidification, which is about how much carbon the sea can absorb before it stops being the sea that we all know and love. Number 4 is ozone depletion. Now, this one is a family favourite. I'm sure many of you will know that the ozone layer protects us from the sun's rays because in 1985, some of you were there, the world agreed to put down the hairspray and started to repair the hole that we'd all made in it. A genuine good news story. Number 5 is biogeochemical flows, which flow off the tongue. I'm sure you'll agree. So this is mainly about the chemicals in fertilizers that are used for growing crops to feed us that then pollute our water. So they actually do flow onto the tongue, although they probably shouldn't. Number 6 is land system change. Don't mess with peat bogs, trust me, you're asking for trouble. Number 7 is fresh water use. Anyone else remember the 1995 hosepipe ban? Well, that. Number 8 is my personal favourite, atmospheric aerosol loading. No, this is not about how much Lynx one puts on in the changing room, lads, but how much soot, how much dust and other particles are clogging up the atmosphere, which causes warming and cooling and changes in the climate that we can't even measure. And last but not least, the rather catchy introduction of novel entities. As the name suggests, novel entities are new substances, they're new forms of old substances, and they're modified life forms that have been made by us and have the potential to change the planet in almost unknowable ways. They could be organic, radioactive, genetically modified. One study in 2015 estimated that more than 100,000 of these already exist. Even more if you count plastics and microplastics and Donald Trump, which the authors said meant, in effect, humanity is repeatedly running global scale experiments on itself. There will be a test on those later, by the way, folks. Now, as I'm sure you're starting to appreciate, the thing about these planetary boundaries is that it's pretty bloody complicated. Scientists believe that climate change and biosphere integrity are the most important because they have the potential to change all of the others, but many of the others also affect the climate and the biosphere. Yikes. And some of them are so complex, we haven't even yet managed to agree measures for them. Enter everyone's favourite multinational polluter, Unilever, founded right here in Bolton, as it happens. They are makers of Ben & Jerry's, Bovril, Coleman's, Cornetto, Flora, Hellman's. I can't believe it's not a real free market, nor Magnum, Marmite, Pot Noodle Walls, Lipton, PG Tips, Comfort, Domestos, Dove, Lynx, Persil, Radox, Shore Surf, Timotei Tresemme, Vaseline, and many more family favourites beside. So they said in an academic paper, they were urging scientists to make these planetary boundaries better, make the measures better, so that it could get a better understanding of how much harm it specifically was allowed to make to all of these fragile systems. Presumably because once we all get a breakdown of exactly how much harm we can make to the planet each year, well, as long as everyone just takes their share, what could possibly go wrong? Now, one thing you do have to do when you're doing a PhD, apart from preparing some jokes about not being that kind of doctor, is to make a contribution to knowledge. And one thing I spotted pretty quickly, folks, was that really climate change, as the scientists call it, should actually be called climate don't change. So, as you can tell, humans are having an incredible, as in huge, not good, impact on the environment. So much so that some in the academic community believe that we should be given our own era, like your auntie in the 1980s. Now, that might sound pretty cool, of the 100 billion people who've become before us, and the trillions that could come after. Little old us get our own geological time period. Sadly, it's a bit like Edward Colston having a statue in Bristol. When you actually look at it, he trafficked more than 80,000 people from West Africa on journeys where tens of thousands of people died on behalf of the British Crown, and he made millions doing it. And much like the debate about the future of Colston's statue, discussions about the Anthropocene, as our new human era is currently being built, have been kicking around since the early 2000s. As yet, the International Commission on Stratigraphy, who use rocks to see into the past and are in charge of time in a certain sense, have not yet approved this recommendation. Of course, you can't just declare a new geological era whenever you fancy, guys. This isn't like buying sweatshop-powered fast fashion from the comfort of your sofa, folks. So what geologists have tried to do in recent years is find evidence of the impact of human activity in rocks, glacier rings, tree rings, so-called golden spikes, as they call it in the industry, although not gold as in good or anything. And of all the potential dawns of man, and I will gladly emphasize the word man there, such as the start of the Industrial Revolution in the late 1700s or the post-1950s, after all the nuclear bomb testing and the baby boom, okay, that wasn't just men, and the rise of plastics, the front runner is 1610, when geologists argued in Nature in 2015 that colonialism, global trade, and coal brought about the Anthropocene. Bingo. So just over 400 years ago, white Europeans set sail and started moving plants here and people there and started a whole load of processes that echo and echo and echo today. Environmental destruction, racism, inequality, and more. Fast forward to the time when speculators went after the precious tantalum needed to power the new PlayStation 2 and killed the majority of a population of land gorillas in Central Africa in the process. Or when Titanic was being filmed in Mexico and the chlorine killed off the sea urchins that local people relied on. There is so much human rubbish in space that there's an interagency space debris coordination committee. And those planetary boundaries are all starting to feel a little bit closer. And here we are, 2020, largely confined to our homes if we have that luxury, with access to online tools if we're not one of the 2 billion people without a reliable energy supply, hand sanitizing and wearing face masks in public, both of which pose an ongoing threat to social life as we know it. Now, if anyone is in from the International Commission on Stratigraphy, You may notice that I'm about to take more than 10 minutes to help save the planet, but heck, this is important. Keep going until they stop you. Now, I was lucky enough to get a mask from my local fancy dress shop, which pivoted during lockdown to provide our new essentials. As a girl with good eyes from a village, you might also call it luck that I'm not making TVs out of toxic materials in Mexico or smartphones in China, but I call it economics. Now, lockdown has presented another opportunity for researchers like me, at least, in that many conferences that would have been expensive in economic and environmental terms have now been hosted online for free. And that means that I've seen the head of the International Energy Agency, who knows a thing or two about this and isn't known for his bra burning. And he emphasised last month that we only have 6 months, now 5, to deal with all of this. But then I've also seen ministers of state, including ours, and officers of international agencies talk about growth and consumers like the planet and its citizens, that's us, don't matter. We cannot have infinite growth with finite resources. I shout at my laptop like some of you might be doing now about my apparently infinite talking. Even proper climate scientist Kevin Anderson emphasised last month that so-called climate progressive countries like the UK are way off meeting the targets that we all agreed to in Paris in 2015, the so-called Paris Agreement, to help the world stay beneath the agreed planetary boundary for climate change, let alone the other 8 we talked about earlier, particularly when taking fairness with developing nations into account when addressing the historical responsibility for the climate burden. While it might have sounded just for fun, agreeing if and when the Anthropocene started, it has real consequences for deciding who's responsible for putting things right. And I know bamboo toothbrushes, but like using dead animals and plants from millions of years ago to knit tamakis, all of the meat most people who have ever been alive could possibly ever imagine magically packaged in your local supermarket, asking Alexa what the weather is like outside your window. You might even see, as I, a journalist turned researcher, must, that the media has a real hand in all of this because it needs us to work more, to make more money, to be able to buy things so it can sell our eyeballs, to see the adverts for cars and holidays and fast fashion, for growth, for things that we don't need to impress people that we don't care about, as economist Tim Jackson says. One world leader, Amina J. Mohammed, the Deputy Secretary General of the UN, speaking at an event hosted by the London School of Economics last month, urged young people from rich nations to make this an election issue. If you're wondering whether that's you, good Zoom tiles, it is. The idea of intergenerational justice was captured rather well by Edmund Burke, considered the father of modern conservatism, bloody ages ago in the late 1700s. He said that this, our planet, us, is a partnership between those who are living, those who are dead, and those who are yet to be born, which surely can't be too many more for our Prime Minister, Boris Johnson. Much of what I've talked about are questions of science, sure, but there are decisions to be made beyond the scope of scientists. And so, as a social scientist, I personally believe that not looking after the planet is a bit like not looking after your nan. We know pretty much everything we do has an impact, and the planet, like your nan, heck, let's call her our nannet, is very wonderful and precious, and time is of the essence. So it's about deciding what's really, really, really necessary. We can't have everything, but fantastically, the best things in life aren't things, except for this mask, which I'll be wearing pandemic or no pandemic. I have been Kirsty Styles. That was a dreadfully inaccurate 12.5 minutes to save our nannet, as we call her in the North. Please and thank you.
Thanks, Kirsty. Thanks, Kirsty, for that tour de force. We need to save our nannet. So, Kirsty, thank you. We've got some great questions in the Q&A once you get your breath back. People are suggesting what alternative names for the Anthropocene period. Should it not be called Capitalocene? And if we're moving beyond the Anthropocene, what would the new climate, don't change era, be called, I think is the question. Yes. I don't know if you've got any answers to that.
Go on, say that to me again.
So if we're moving beyond the Anthropocene, what would you call the new climate change era?
I don't quite get what you mean by that.
So
I would call it Kirsty Styles era.
Yeah. Okay, another one. Do you think we're close to not being able to go to space thanks to rubbish?
Yeah, one of the interesting stories about this whole space thing is that they don't talk about the incredible environmental impact that going to space has. So today on the news, they were talking about how great it'll be when we all go to space. They were also talking about the sixth great extinction. They were talking about how I think a quarter of all land mammals in the UK are in danger of extinction. And you're like, do we want to save these little guys here, or do we want to go there and like hope for the best? Yeah. I wouldn't say that going to space is important, but yes, you're right. If we do go, you might be in danger of a crash. Yeah.
And have you got anything to say about soil? Martin O'Shaughnessy wants to know.
Oh, I love soil. Good question.
Did you mention it? Was the question? Did you mention soil?
I didn't mention soil. It's certainly part of what we'd consider land system change, and peat bogs, finest of all the soils. I have to say my research is more in the environmental impact of the media, and that is all around, you know, how we first started using pulp paper for newspapers, loads of water use there, really toxic. Then we started using copper for telegraphy and telephony, loads of pollution there. And yeah, there are, you know, hundreds of different minerals inside all of our smartphones, and all of the associated labour and environmental costs that go with that. There ain't no soil in a smartphone though.
That's right. Well, let's leave it there for now. Kirsty, I just want to tell you a bit about her. She's worked for the New Statesman and the Bureau of Investigative Journalism. She's the creator of Comedy Night Stand Up for Journalism, the award-winning weekly economics podcast, and she set up a public speaker training program for women in tech in the North. So again, let's say thank you to Kirsty Styles for her story, 10 Minutes to Save the Planet.
Thank you very much.